the Universal Wayland Session Manager, otherwise known as UWSM. Now, the Hyperland wiki, it basically overcomplicates things, along with the UWSM wiki. I tried reading it, and unless you have a PhD in the topic that they're talking about, you're pretty unlikely to understand. That's probably exaggerating it a little bit, but you get what I mean. Like, they talk about units and services and targets and wants and wanted by God knows what else they talk about over there, but you kind of really need to be well versed in this stuff in order to get the hang of it by just reading the wiki, the UWSM wiki and the Hyperland one. So I am here to simplify things for you and give you a simple way to go about this stuff. Right? I will show you the simple minimalist way to use UWSM. That way, you end up with the least bloat and the most functionality, because last thing that we as Arch Linux users want is bloat. We actually end up using Arch Linux in order to avoid a lot of the bloat that most distros shove down your throat, which is why it is imperative that we make sure that we don't have bloat on our systems. Okay? So here is what I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you what UWSM is, who should use it, and the minimalist brain-dead way to use it, because honestly, that has to be the best way. Now, what is UWSM and why should I bother using it? Well, it's what it says on the tin, right? It's a Wayland session manager that's compositor agnostic. That's basically fancy speak for it's a way to manage your Hyperland session or any other Wayland compositor session. That's it. It's a way to manage it. Simply put, it's a tiny tool that allows you to start Hyperland or any other Wayland compositor the right way. Now, what do I mean by the right way? I am going to show you some slides later, right? So why should you use it? Because dbus, which is a message bus system, might not automatically start. That's one thing. Now, what is dbus? Dbus, as I said right here, it's a message bus system. So if you have any event that's going to happen, let's say that you change your volume, right? You press whatever key it is on your keyboard that you use to change volume, and then the volume is changed. So what happens is the respective program that is going to handle the changes in volume is going to be alerted that the volume has changed through dbus, which is the message bus system. Or let's say, for example, you get a notification and you click on a particular button in the notification, or you just swipe the notification away. Okay, the action of doing whatever you did to the notification, whether it's clicking a button or swiping it away, is going to emit a signal, I'm guessing. Yes, a signal, or basically, it's going to send a message to the respective app that's supposed to handle such actions and get it to handle the action, basically. Okay, and what's another example that we could use to explain dbus? Yeah, message bus system. So we've done notifications. Yeah, same thing goes for brightness, right? So anytime you change the brightness using any keys on your keyboard or you send a command, a dbus message is just going to be sent to the respective app to handle it. And what's going to happen is that the brightness is changed accordingly based on whatever key that you pressed. Okay, so that's what dbus is all about. So this dbus, this message bus system might not automatically start, right? That's one thing. Then it figures out systemd user stuff for you. Now, what is systemd user? So basically, you can think about this like, so let's say that you were starting apps or services using systemctl, right? So if you had to, for example, install a virtual machine, you would type in systemctl. Okay, first you would install QEMU and libvirt, right? All those packages. And once you install them, you would start the service, the libvirt service with sudo systemctl start libvirt.service. Great. Now, what if you wanted to actually start an application, right? A service for your own user. So you didn't want it to start system-wide, but then let's say you had a couple of applications, like for example, like that dynamic wallpaper script that I showed in one of my YouTube videos, right? You can just go and check that out to see what I'm talking about when it comes to systemd user services, right? User services and timers. Okay. So that, yeah. So coming back, systemd user allows you to start applications or services only for your particular user. So let's say I create a service and I put it in config systemd or wherever it's supposed to go. And then I say that this service is going to auto start, let's say my browser and then my terminal as soon as I log in, right? In order to start that, you might just use systemd user instead of operating with system level, as in the entirety of the system levels systemd, right? You would just use systemd-user to make it work for your current user only. Okay? Hopefully that made sense. But basically, just know that it figures out systemd-user stuff for you so that you can start services, timers, and whatever else for your particular user. Okay, then we have environment variables. So environment variables might not get set properly if you don't use it, right? So we have a couple of environment variables like xtg wayland display, xtg wayland session, right? I'm pretty sure those are the names, but something along the lines of that. So we have a couple of xtg environment variables that might not get set properly unless you use UWSM. Okay, and what happens if you don't actually set those environment variables properly? So some apps, like for example, the file picker windows that I showed you in one of the earlier modules, right? The file picker windows, which is, it's called, XTG desktop portal, right? So that depends on a couple of the environment variables to be set properly. So if you don't use UWSM, things might not work properly in that regard, okay, if you're unlucky. Then what happens is it also kills apps after logout so that nothing lingers. Smiley face, E. Yeah, so another issue that potentially might happen is that when you log out, right? Let's say that you log out, but then some applications might just keep running in the background because they didn't terminate properly. Or another thing happened, let's say Hyperland crashed for whatever reason, and then you were kicked out of your current session. Okay, but what happens is because it wasn't a graceful exit, as we say, because it wasn't a graceful exit, the processes that were running under Hyperland, like for example your terminal or Waybar or SwayNC or any other app, might just continue to keep running despite there not being any Hyperland. Okay, so what it does is it kills all the apps that need to be killed after the logout so that you don't have any lingering processes around. Great. Now, what would you do, or what would happen rather, without UWSM? Some things might work at first, but then randomly die later, like notifications, the file picker menus, which is the XTG desktop portal that I told you about earlier, screen sharing, which is also related to the portal, and so on. That's one thing. Then environment variables might not get set properly. Wait, did I? Hold on. Yeah, basically the same thing. Yeah. Environment variables might not get set properly, and there are higher chances of zombies. So what is a zombie, right? A zombie process is basically a process that has finished running. Okay, it's finished running, but then its parent process has not recognized that the process, like its child process, has finished running, and then it didn't pick up its exit status, what we call reaping, right? So the parent process hasn't reaped, what we say, hasn't reaped the exit status of its child. So what happens is the process just remains in the process table. So it doesn't occupy any memory. It doesn't, like, barely any memory actually. And then it doesn't occupy any of your CPU usage. It's just going to sit in the process table, right? What we call process table when you type in ps aux in your terminal. So it just sits there, and then it's marked with a Z. That's it, in order to denote that it is a zombie process. Now, eventually what might happen is the parent process that was parenting this child zombie process might just recognize that an exit status has been sent out by the child. So it might pick that up and then kill the zombie process, right? The parent itself might do that. Or what might happen is the init system itself, right? So systemd, as we're using on Arch, systemd itself might just recognize that it's a zombie and deal with it appropriately. Okay? And that's pretty much it. Yeah, explain the higher chances of zombies. Great. Now, who should use it? If you want to reduce the chances of stuff randomly breaking on your machine and you want to streamline things a bit more, then go ahead, right? Now, this is a very edge case of stuff randomly breaking, because if you've been using Hyperland for quite a while, you'll know that it's quite stable, and then whatever automatic configuration that they do for you or whatever they've mentioned in the wiki, like if you applied that or if you just watched this program in its entirety and applied it, things should work like flawlessly almost. You're not going to have to face any issues, like barely anything. If there were any issues, they would most probably be with your package manager, like that on Arch, basically. If there were any issues, that is. Okay, so yeah, if you wanted to streamline things and you really wanted to, you know, maybe satisfy your OCD if you have any, right? You could go ahead. Now, If your current setup is working and you haven't noticed any issues, don't switch. Don't switch. So don't fix what ain't broke, right? Use Occam's razor as I describe in my applying mental models module, right? That module is on the left side, I'm pretty sure. I have it pinned as a bonus module. So you can just go check that out. I explain using Occam's razor, which is a mental model, and I explain more stuff. So basically, yeah, just go check that module out. But basically, it says to keep things simple. So use that razor over here and keep things simple, right? I read this quote somewhere and it was an idiot admires complexity, but then a genius strives for simplicity or something like that. But basically, keep things simple, right? That. Okay, now for the minimalist, no BS way of going about UWSM. Okay, so I have the Hyperland wiki over here, and by the way, little quick update, they've updated the domain name to wiki.hyper.land, so that's fun. But anyway, here is what I was explaining, right? This is what I was talking to you about, universal wait and session manager, okay, recommend way to start Hyperland session, blah, 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 so on and so forth. So we install UWSM by pacman-s, UWSM, and libnewt. So before we actually install them, let me show you what those packages actually do. So UWSM, of course, I've explained it already. But yeah, it's a standalone wait and session manager. And libnewt, look that up, libnewt. Yeah, not Eric's windowing toolkit. It's text mode windowing with slang. So basically, libnewt is going to be the window that you see when you are trying to use UWSM as a sort of a kind of like display manager UI. So let me just show you what that looks like. But first, let's make sure it's installed, right? So I've already run the command previously. That is going to be this a-s uwsm libnewt -- needed. So it only installs it if required. So I enter password and it's going to skip it because it's already installed. Great. So if I show you UWSM GitHub, let me just show you what the screenshot of UWSM looks like when you're trying to log into Hyperland through the app. So scroll down and this is what it looks like. So you get choose compositor and we have a choice between different compositors, an OK and a cancel. This is the window that you're going to get when you log in through your TTY, or when you log into your TTY. I'll show you how to set that up real quick over here. Right, and whatever menu that you're seeing over here, this is basically libnewt. So if we again look up libnewt, it's a windowing utility, whatever, right? Not Eric's windowing toolkit. It's text mode windowing, as you can see here with slang. Right here, I don't think we see slang, but that's the idea. So let's close this and let's go to launching Hyperland with UWSM. So we have two ways to do it here, in the TTY or using a display manager. So I'm going to show you the TTY version because if you're only using Hyperland, then this is probably going to be your best bet. Now, if you're using a display manager, it's pretty simple. I'll explain it in just a sec. So let me open this, right? Add this code in your shell profile. So if we open .zprofile, this is the code that we've added so far. So if our display and our TTY basically, so this is checking for our TTY. So if we're on the first TTY, we are going to execute Hyperland. Now, instead of this, let's just delete it or comment it out. And by the way, there's this cool tactic you can use in Vim. You can press Ctrl V and then use J to shift down by a couple of lines till where you want to comment. Press Shift I, okay, then type the character that you want to comment out with. That's going to be a hash in this case. Press Escape, and that is multi-line commenting in Vim. Okay, it works. Now, it's not exactly the most graceful way to do it, but it gets the job done, and that is what we're looking for. Great. Now, to launch Hyperland with UWSM, let's just put this inside. Okay, now, if we were to add a descriptive comment, an explanatory comment in front of this, it would be start Hyperland through UWSM, and it's going to be choice, right? So here it starts UWSM default. It shows you that menu that was created using libnewt. But if you don't want this, okay, we can just comment this line out. Comment this out. Same technique if you're on Vim. Okay, now if you don't want this, you can copy this section of code. And then it's basically the same thing, but then it's going to auto log in to Hyperland. Start Hyperland through UWSM. You can just make this something like automatic, right? So let me explain what this means. If UWSM check, may start, then exec UWSM start hyperland.desktop, right? So this is basically the same as what we have over here, right? Once UWSM is running, just make sure that you start Hyperland directly. That's what this code is doing. Now, if you instead wanted to see the choice, let's say you had different Wayland compositors that were installed. You had something like Sway, Wayfire, River, LabWC, and God knows whatever else compositors are available these days, right? So if you had that, it would just execute UWSM with directly, and you would get the menu that we saw earlier. Okay, that is it. And believe it or not, that is pretty much everything that you need to do in order to make sure that UWSM is running and working properly. So I'll just right quit this. I'll show you what else is here inside the wiki, and then I'll log out and log back in and tell you what's different. Okay, so using a display manager. If you use display manager, just choose Hyperland UWSM managed entry and a display manager selection menu. And that's what this shows you actually. That is what. So when you see the menu for the first time, let's say you were choosing this option where you had to pick between different Wayland compositors, you would see Hyperland UWSM managed, and you would see regular old Hyperland. Okay, now because we want to use UWSM, we would pick the the UWSM managed version, obviously. But if you were directly starting it, then you won't have to see any of that menu stuff, right? Great. Then blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now launching applications inside a session. Here is where things get a bit more complicated. Let me tell you why this is actually overcomplicating things a bit much. First, I'll explain what I've understood over here, and then I will tell you how to go about this. So the concept of a session managed by systemd implies also running applications as units. So the way systemd works is you have a bunch of units, what we call, that systemd can execute. So a unit is any sort of entity or any sort of file, right? A unit is a file that the systemd deals with, right? So if we just look up systemd units, yeah, so it's basically any resource that the system knows how to operate on and manage. Okay, so that could be service files, that could be target files, timers, and I've covered how to use services and timers in my dynamic wallpapers video, so if you want, you can just go check that out. Okay, I've uploaded it on YouTube, so you can just go see that for what different unit files are like, but basically that. So what this is implying is that you're going to run applications too, like Kitty and, for example, yeah, Kitty, and then your browser as systemd units. Now you can see why this would actually be a bit more, what do you call it, overkill, and really overcomplicating things a lot. So what we would do here is auto-starting apps would work this way, right? So with exec once, we would use UWSM app -- my command and then pass in the arguments as usual. Now, if we were to launch any applications, for example, like with our file manager, okay, that would be with, let's see, yeah, exec UWSM app, and then we just pass in the desktop file. Now, as you can see, this is definitely overcomplicating things a little bit and making a bit more bloat exist than is actually necessary. So if you want to, you can replace all the exec once lines in config hyper modules Autostart. Okay, so you could replace swww, like sudaemon, with this command over here. So it would be, so if we were to use UWSM to start the wallpaper daemon, for example, it would be UWSM app -- okay, these two dashes, and then we just type in the command like usual. Okay, just paste that in like so. Okay, paste it in, and yeah, get rid of this ampersand, and that's pretty much it. We don't have to do anything else. UWSM is handling the auto start and the killing of this application. So let's say we log out of Hyperland or Hyperland crashes for whatever reason, it's going to deal with it in the ways that I told you about earlier. You can do the same thing for Waybar, Sway, and C and the Polkit agent as well. But since that would be introducing unnecessary complexity, I'm not going to do it over here. Okay, same thing goes for your keybinds. So if I show you what the keybinds would look like, right? So modules binds.conf. And here, let's say, for example, we were to replace this hyperpicker command with one that was UWSM managed. So we copy this part over here, copy it, and then paste it over here, write it. Now, if we try and execute, I don't think it's going to actually load. Okay, it does load. Right now, it does load. But let's log out and log back in and see if it actually makes a difference. Now, that's the thing, right? With UWSM, you're not meant to see a difference because it's just supposed to be cleaner and working behind the scenes for you. You're not actually meant to get any sort of immediately tangible benefit from it, but just more maintenance, if you will, right? At the cost of a bit more complexity if you're willing to deal with it. Okay, again, as before, I will keep it the same as it was. And now for the Autostart section. So XTG Autostart is handled by systemd, and its target is activated in UWSM managed session automatically. Okay, great. Some applications provide native systemd user units to be auto-started with. So for example, that's what I was mentioning earlier with systemctl-user enable. So let's say, for example, you had an app or a service, like let's say it was Bluetooth, but obviously Bluetooth is system managed, but let's say Bluetooth was user managed, right? You would use the command systemctl-user enable and then that app, the user app that you wanted to start with systemd. Now, for most users, we're actually not going to be using this auto start section as much, if at all. Okay, right? Now, unless you're a really advanced user, you're not going to be dabbling around in here much. Okay, maximum use case for UWSM would be as a sort of middleman between the display manager, like if you were using STDM, between the display manager and the Wayland compositor, right? So it acts as a middleman between that. Okay, that and along with launching applications inside the session. These two are the main use cases. If you want to extrapolate more information from this page of the wiki in order to customize the auto start section, you can do so, right? We've got more stuff that you can use UWSM for, but those are the basics. That's pretty much the minimalist, no BS way of using the universal Wayland session manager in order to get stuff to be a bit more streamlined.